Balake. Where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Ron is here tonight with Owen Morgan from Telltale. Is your channel Telltale or Owen Morgan Telltale?
Well, it started out as Telltale Atheist many years ago, and then I moved away from that entirely. I removed Atheist from the name about 6 years ago, and then 3 years ago, well, actually recently I removed Telltale, so it's just Owen Morgan now. Telltale is there for posterity.
Owen, I just realized my microphone wasn't plugged in.
No, I heard you.
Does that sound a little better now?
Yeah, it sounds different for sure.
Okay, good. Okay, my viewers for the longest time, but I went with the Ron intro, even though we are live streaming to both of our channels, so that was a little unfair.
Oh, no, that's fine.
But for anyone watching on my channel, this is Owen's channel, Owen Morgan Telltale, big channel. Former Jehovah's Witness is you are, and I'm a former Scientologist. This is my channel for Owen's audience here. My viewers have been suggesting that we do a collab for the longest time. I must have
think
said
we have
something.
a fan in common.
Is it Joni?
Yeah, Joni Cummings, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like I must have said something recently that made her try harder to get us to collab. I don't remember what it was.
Right. Oh, she's been super chatting me and telling me I got to get with you and talk about all this.
I think we talk about our respective subjects in a similar way. I've seen some of your videos, and you strike me as someone who talks about what you talk about just very casually. It doesn't even, you shoot from the hip a lot like I do. You're very good at just speaking live, speaking to the camera, talking about what you know and sharing your thoughts,
Yep.
How about we kind of interview each other?
All right. That sounds good. Well, I got a couple of questions for you, actually.
Let's do it.
Why don't we just start from the beginning? When did you leave Scientology?
Okay. Officially March 2014.
2014. Okay.
Officially. Like that's when I got declared a suppressive person. And I say my route out of Scientology started in 2009 when the Tampa Bay Times wrote, back then it was called the St. Pete Times, but
I lived in St. Pete and Tampa in 2013, 2014, actually.
Did you really?
I did. Yeah.
I've been here in Clearwater since 2006.
Really? Maybe we crossed paths or something on the street. That's crazy.
Okay. When did you leave the Jehovah's Witnesses?
2011, actually. Yep. I ended up leaving, 2009, but I officially got my head clear in 2011, like realized that this is all complete nonsense. I think I was disfellowshipped officially in 2009 or 2010 and like lost contact with everybody. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were you born and raised in the St. Pete area?
No. I was born and raised in Connecticut and then West Virginia. Now I'm in New York City. I'm just all over. I just lived in St. Pete and Tampa for a couple of years. I was a software engineer there. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So 2009 is when I like mentally started to leave Scientology. It probably took me less than a year to in my mind be out, but no matter how much I was out in my mind, I didn't actually want to get kicked out of Scientology.
Right.
Like I didn't actually want to lose my family, my friends, my job, my kids' school, their friends, my wife's family. Like I was totally content to just be an under the radar spy, siphoning, feeding information to the big bad SPs like Marty Rathman and Mike Rinder. Like I was prepared to live that life forever. I was in denial about the sustainability of that.
Is that what happened? You ended up like getting kicked out and losing everything like that, or?
Yes. And that's really what's, Scientology is not really in the business of getting rid of anyone. So with me, the nutshell version is that 2009, Tampa Bay Times issued this series of articles called The Truth Rundown, interviewing a bunch of high-level Scientology executives who had left not only the Sea Org, but actually Scientology. And these were people who, to me, were famous faces in Scientology management. I had no idea they were out of Scientology. And they had a lot of eye-opening things to say. And then a couple years later, one of the former Scientology executives sent out an email to like every Scientologist in the world, asking people to stop supporting David Miscavige, that David Miscavige had basically taken Scientology off purpose, off of what L. Ron Hubbard said it should be doing. That email was a very big deal to an awful lot of Scientologists, including my mom. So my mom started spreading that information, that email to other people. This is the very short version. And then she got kicked out for doing that. And then they went to me and they said, well, you have to disconnect from your mom or you're going to get kicked out. So for a couple years, I just lied my ass off and pretended that I was disconnected from her. I even came up with some huge bullshit story that I went in and told him on the e-meter, this whole sob story on how I disconnected from her. It was all a total lie. Now
E-meter's not hard to trick?
No, any trained auditor knows how to trick the e-meter.
I'm surprised. I thought for sure, like I've never used one or even seen one, but I thought for sure it'd be harder to trick than that. Crazy.
Not at all. Not at all.
Interesting.
But Scientologists spy on each other all the time, and they write reports on each other and turn in the reports to the church. So like my friends, and I was a little careless. I would drop little hints here and there because I also was trying to figure out if any of my friends were also on their way out of Scientology.
But your mom is out at this point, right?
She's totally out. She's expelled. She's declared. And anyway, long story short, after a couple years of getting reports on all the evidence that I was still in touch with my mom, and I was posting anonymously on these blogs, like Mike Rinder's blog, Marty Rathman's blog.
Right.
And that wasn't exactly very subtle. And Scientology put a whole unit together to compile all the blog posts from these various anonymous handles and try to figure out who they were. And at one point with Marty Rathman's blog, Scientology managed to get the list of all IP addresses and all emails associated with each post.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, because Marty left, right?
This was before he officially went back to Scientology.
Okay, so
they either hacked his blog or he was feeding them information.
That is insane. Let me just establish something because my audience may not be too familiar with it, but Marty Rathbun and Mike Rinder both left together and worked together to battle Scientology originally, right?
They didn't actually leave together, but you have the right idea.
Okay, they worked together anyways. And they were like really high profile people who left, like extremely influential. I think they even worked with like the celebrity centers and stuff like that, right?
I mean, Mike and Marty were two of the most senior Scientology officials in the entire church.
Like, I think, did Marty know L. Ron Hubbard or?
Marty never met L. Ron Hubbard, but okay. Mike worked with L. Ron Hubbard.
Wow, that's crazy. So Marty exits for 10 years or something like that, right? And then goes back. What is that real? What happened? Was it blackmail? What's your thought on this?
It's a combination of blackmail and just giving him a deal sweet enough. Like Marty was at a stage in his life where he was rather old. He was pretty much unemployable. Pretty much, he and his wife had just adopted a son. These are reasons. I mean, these are things that are true. They are not, to me, reasons that actually explain what he did. Like, if anyone knew exactly how much he was biting off and going up against Scientology, it was Marty Rathman. Marty Rathman was like the second in command of all of Scientology, basically. So the idea that after 10 years, it was just too much for him, I don't personally believe it, but it's just one of the pieces of the puzzle.
It's just blows
I've also been told by someone who was in touch with Marty directly, whose name is also ironically Mike, that Scientology had caught Marty on camera abusing the child that they had just adopted. And that they were using that to blackmail him. That doesn't come from me, but that information came directly to me from person who claims to have gotten the information directly from Marty.
I had no idea. It's such a shame. Like, I went to these websites because, of course, Scientology fair games people, and one of the first steps they do is make a website. Who is blah? Who is Leah Remini or whatever? And they have all these videos and everything. I went through like a whole bunch of these not too long ago, just reading through them. And Marty Rathbun's face is front and center, explaining like all this stuff calmly and rationally with a picture of Leah Remini, like they caught her in a freeze frame, like super angry or something. It's just insane, the propaganda that comes out of these people.
Marty was like the #1 guy exposing Scientology abuse, exposing David Miscavige, working to bring down Scientology. And now he is this pathetic North Korean POW style dude who sits down and does videos for Scientology saying what a bigot Mike Rinder is, what a liar Leah Remini is. And it's like, dude, you are the worst of the worst. No. Scientologists hate you. Now former Scientologists hate you. You've turned on everyone you've ever known. Like you can't be lower
Right.
than that.
Well,
You know,
I read a book called The Unbreakable Miss Lovely not too long ago. You may know it, by
I've read it.
Tony
It's great.
Ortega. Oh, it is
Yep.
super good. Yeah. I actually knew about like this whole thing that happened like before reading the book, but I didn't know all of the details to it. If anybody is unaware in my audience, it's where this woman was framed for a whole bunch of stuff and fair gamed by Scientology, basically, right? And they followed her around, and L. Ron Hubbard had like a grudge against her. He just wanted to take her down at any cost.
And she was just a journalist. She wasn't even a former Scientologist.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. So do you think that there's like fair gaming to that degree anymore? Did that die with L. Ron Hubbard, or?
So let's define to that degree. The kind of stuff they did to Paulette Cooper, they would never try doing today because it would risk, if they ever got caught doing it, they would immediately lose their tax exempt status. And the Scientology, Miscavige succeeded in getting Scientology's tax exempt status back in 1993. And if he were to lose that again, they lost it previously, which, by the way, as a Scientologist, I never knew that. I thought 1993 was the first time Scientology was ever getting tax exemption.
Me too.
Back in the early days, Scientology had tax exemption. They took it away. The IRS determined that L. Ron Hubbard was guilty of annulment, so enriching himself from the proceeds of Scientology. So they took it away.
I had no idea.
And so if they were to be, I mean, they framed Paulette Cooper for sending bomb threats to U.S. embassies. I mean, they had someone who was going around doing some sort of political canvassing, getting people to sign a petition or something like this. And they collected her fingerprints and her thumbprints and whatnot. And then they took stationery from a hotel that she had stayed at, and they faked bomb threats in her name and sent them to like a U.S. embassy or two.
And people believed it too.
She was going to stand trial.
Yeah.
She was charged.
I think she's looking at 10 to 15 years for the first one. And then they were on their way to doing another one, Operation Freakout. Oh my God, dude. But I think that L. Ron Hubbard's son, they call him Nibs, was involved in all of this, right? And it just confuses the hell out of me that this dude is working with Paulette Cooper, a journalist working against Scientology, against his own father, writing critical articles, and then he goes back to it again, and then leaves, comes back, leaves, come back. It's like, how does this happen? When I left Jehovah's Witnesses, I felt like it was like a one-way street. Like, I'm done with this. I walked away completely. How is it that these people keep walking back into Scientology? It blows me away.
I know. With Marty Rathbun, like, he's not actually a practicing Scientologist anymore. He's just a paid attack dog from Miscavige. Like,
really?
It's not like Marty Rathbun is actually a Scientologist. It's honestly even worse. He's just a paid shill.
I had no idea. I think they offered Paulette Cooper, that journalist, money to spy for them and work for them and all that, right? And
I don't even remember that, to be honest.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you what happened. She sat down, they called her, and they offered, after everything was all settled, they sat down at a public, coffee shop or whatever, and a guy pulls out a check for $50,000 and puts it on the desk and asks her if she'll do this. And she says no. He pulls out another check, puts it on the table. She can see the checks in his pocket, and he pulls out 9 of them. And she just keeps saying no. $450,000 she turned away from. So it's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
The story of Paulette Cooper, as I was reading that book, what's mind-blowing about it is that at every point where you think they couldn't possibly trick her again after everything she already knows they've done to her, they do.
Yeah.
And eventually, even after they've ruined her life, she ends up taking a job with someone who's nothing more than someone that Scientology is paying to employ her so that they can spy on her.
Right? That is psychotic, isn't it? And the dude that she lived with for, I don't like years, her best friend took care of her dog at her worst, was a spy for Scientology. Like, what the hell? It's crazy how integrated into her life they got,
Yes.
Scary stuff.
So the question was, do they still do that shit? They don't do it quite to that extent, and they don't do it with their own members anymore. Meaning they won't use their own members because that's too obvious now. So they'll hire lawyers who will hire seedier lawyers, who will hire private investigators, who will hire thugs. So it's almost like Miscavige would keep doing all of it if he truly thought he could get away with it. There's no
Right.
moral reason why they've stopped doing this stuff. It's purely cover your ass tactics. If it like, you know, if they've calmed down at all, it's only because they're like, oh boy, that would really, you know, come back on us. And the truth is Miscavige would do anything to protect the tax exemption.
Right.
Now, so they still use private investigators, but it's not illegal to use private investigators. And you know, they were paying PIs $10,000 a week to follow David Miscavige's father when his father left Scientology.
Well, I remember Ron Miscavige, right?
Yeah, Ron Sr. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember listening to some stuff about him and everything back in the day. So are you being fair gamed? Like, I understand fair gaming isn't as bad as it used to be, but do they have a website for you and everything? Or
Oh, dude, all the time. Smith-Levin.com is a hate website created by Scientology.
Really? Oh,
It's not even.
Have you
it's
gone
not even
through it
who-
on
it's not
on your channel yet? You got to go through
have.
it and look at all of it. Okay.
I have. I'm like, hey, they want to put up those videos. I'm gonna make money on them.
Right? Exactly.
No, I do reaction videos because not only do they have you know, just web pages, but then they'll do highly produced interviews with like my wife's family members
Wow.
about
Man.
how, you know, I'm so horrible to my wife. I beat my kids. You know, they interview a whole bunch of Sea Org members that I used to work with. Oh, Aaron was violent. Everyone was terrified of him. He would hide in his office all day, except for when he would come out to scream at people, and then he would go back. They're the silliest videos.
It's
And
crazy.
There's like a dozen of them. And
I mean, who believes this stuff, though? I mean,
that's
I
the
guess
thing,
somebody
nobody.
does, right?
No, nobody does.
It's crazy.
Nobody does. It's one of the reasons you can't really sue them for doing it, because in the US you have to prove damages. And it's like, how do you prove damages when nobody believes a word Scientology says about anything?
Yeah, that makes sense. They are not.
And so other fair
credible.
gaming, for example. So yeah, Scientology will call, you know, I have a real estate business, and any property that I sell, Scientology will eventually make some fake phone call to them saying, pretending to be someone who's looking to hire me, which is like, I'm not for hire, I work for myself. And so they'll be like, oh, like imagine being someone who bought a house for me, and you're getting a phone, someone doing due diligence on me because they are looking to hire me and they just wanted to check references. And I'd be like, how did you get my phone number?
Right.
And all they're doing is looking for someone who will say anything negative about me. And the person in question would have no idea they're talking to Scientology. They think they're actually.
Crazy.
So eventually they'll call me, be like, oh, hey, just wanted you to know I got this phone call, checking references. I gave you a glowing review. And I'm like, oh, tell me more.
Right. Really mess with them. That's so interesting. So it doesn't bother you too much, you don't think? Like, it doesn't really affect your life that much?
It's never affected my life in any way.
Oh, that's
I mean, I
plus.
busted a PI outside of my house just 2 or 3 months ago. And this was a guy, a few different guys. My neighbors had been complaining to the police that these people were parking outside of their houses just all day long for months and months and months. And when I found out about this, I was like, how could you guys not have told me?
Right.
And like, oh, we just assumed you knew. I'm like, oh, if I knew, I would have pounced on these guys and put them on YouTube. So, you know, I sent a text to everyone in the neighborhood, please, for the love of God, when you see these guys, text me. I'm gonna pounce on them. Yeah. And I finally got the opportunity. And the weird thing is they're parked like a whole block down from my house. So their job isn't necessarily to spy on me so much as it is to know where I am.
Okay.
And
probably intimidate you a little bit if you are aware that they're there anyways. No?
No, they know that kind of would have the opposite effect on me. Like, I'm going to be intimidated by some dude just watching my house. Like, I'm going to turn that into content, you know?
Yeah.
Which is exactly what I did. And busted him, got him on video. So he's parked here. I pull up coming the other way, and I jump out of my truck with the phone right up to his window. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Wow.
What's your name? He rolls his window. He makes the mistake of rolling his window down. I'm like, what's your name, buddy? He's like, nothing. And he starts driving off, and I'm running next to him. And yeah, we were able to identify him. He's a private investigator. Found out where he lived. Local journalist even called him up to talk to him. And unless they've just gotten really, really good, or they have some hidden cameras in some of my neighbors' houses, they haven't come around since then. I wish they would though, because it really is great content.
Right? That is absolutely crazy. Yeah, I actually, I don't know, a few years ago, I've been, following extremists nutcases for years and years at this point. Anytime a new cult pops up or catches my attention in one way or another, I'm always paying attention to it. Actually, it seems like, I haven't mentioned this yet, but it seems like Matthew McConaughey is doing some kind of weird stuff at this immediate moment. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I've heard some mentions about it, but I didn't know if it was a joke.
Seems to be real. I mean, I haven't looked into it. Maybe it's just BS self-help nonsense. But yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to look into it a little bit more. But anyway, every time, some cult pops up, I jump on it and want to investigate and understand what's happening and how we got here and everything. And I have definitely upset some people along the way. So I now live behind a security guard. I have actually had like crazy death threats, burn down my house and slash my tires and all kinds of crazy stuff over the past few years. Yeah.
Which group, if you want to say, which group
I'll
has
tell
been
you.
the worst?
By far, it's been MAGA. Like, I'm not talking just Republicans. I'm talking far right, like MAGA extremists.
Huh.
I talk about them and their ideology and how they got to where they are, and QAnoners specifically, like people who believe JFK Jr. is going to return on the grassy knoll and stuff, that kind of thing. I talk about that a little bit. And
I would just guess that they weren't necessarily an organized, that you just have individual people who are so pissed off with what you're saying.
Yeah, they were pissed off about what I was saying. A Facebook group formed in my town of 3,500 people. This is a couple of years ago. 3,500 people in the town, 1,900 people on the Facebook page. And they were all driving by my house, honking their horn every 15 seconds, getting a new horn honk, getting death threats from everybody, couldn't trust the cops in the town. And I still, every now and then, get threats from people coming in, like pictures of my front door or whatever, even after moving to New York
people
City.
In your town.
Yeah. Oh yeah. More than half.
Where do you live?
Well, it was Milton, West Virginia. No, it's fine. It was Milton, West Virginia. Now I'm in New York City, Manhattan.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Other than that, before that, who was the worst?
Oh, let me think for a second. I don't think I've really gotten too much blowback, and that may be like a function of the fact that I wasn't very big at the time, like, years ago. But the MAGA stuff happened, I think 3 years ago, and I was zeroed in on what was going on with that. But yeah, I think people just generally go about their business and don't pay too much attention. It's just sometimes people get really upset and try to do something about it. So
the Jehovah's Witness, like, you're a former Jehovah's Witness.
I am.
And I was telling you before that former Jehovah's Witnesses seem to have, just anecdotally from feedback, seem to have some of the most similar experiences to former Scientologists, or there's something about their experience. There's something about the experience of Scientologists and the stories that former Scientologists have that seem to resonate with former Jehovah's Witnesses more than other groups. That's purely anecdotal, but that's my anecdotal information.
Right.
How would you compare the way the Jehovah's Witnesses go after former members who are vocal to Scientology?
Actually, so how would I compare how Jehovah's Witnesses are against ex-members, is what you're saying? Yeah. Not too bad, actually. Matter of fact, a few years ago, here's the thing. Jehovah's Witnesses, as Scientologists do, forbid their members from looking at any, offensive content, like any apostate, SP information. You can't look at that stuff. And that largely includes even the people at the very top of Jehovah's Witnesses. They're not going around looking for any of this stuff. They do know some specific locations where they go to and they look, like XJW subreddit, for example. They kind of monitor that. They have people in there looking at it. But by and large, they don't pay any attention to it. And also, they're pacifists. So they won't go after you. They won't attack you. I mean, somebody calls me and threatens me and tells me he's a Jehovah's Witness, I'm really not afraid of that at all, honestly. There was a dude when my sister was little, there was a dude at a big convention, Jehovah's Witness convention, with like 1,000, 2,000 people, who stood up and started talking about, yelling apostate stuff, like stuff that's oppositional to Jehovah's Witnesses. And there was like a chain of Jehovah's Witnesses that like linked arms with each other and circled the guy in like a big circle and walked out the front door with him in the middle of it. So that's generally how they deal with opposition.
Wow.
Yeah. Pretty interesting.
Do they have secret confidential information you're not allowed to know, like Scientologists do?
Oh, let's see. I think that they do, but it's not as much. I think the most important things that people are trying to get their hands on right now is what is alleged to exist, a list of I'm trying to think of people who take advantage of children, a list of those people over the past 30 years. But as far as, for example, Xenu stuff and secretive documents you get as you get bigger, not really. I mean, they have an elder's handbook that says some pretty twisted stuff, but yeah, that's not too hard to get your hands on.
So let me ask you, do you think the organization would maintain such a list?
Oh, yeah, they do. Actually, in the elder's handbook, it's changed over the past few years. So 1988, I think, may have been one of the releases for the handbooks. Anyways, in the 80s or the 90s, there was an elder's manual that basically said if a kid is taken advantage of, there have to be 2 witnesses to what happened, either 2 victims or another person has to have witnessed it directly, or we don't say a word. And that was there's a gigantic gaping hole there where people were, taking advantage of a kid, moving to a new congregation because nobody can say anything. And then they were doing it again and moving to another, doing it again, So they released a new issue, I think in 2010, that was supposed to fix that, but it really didn't. I mean, there's this whole big ridiculous mess, but ultimately the bottom line is in the elder's handbook, it says, if this is happening, call their legal department, call the branch office and tell them what's going on. And I have to imagine that they're writing this information down. Like, why would you even call them if you're not writing this stuff down, right? They must have a list. But it's hard to know for sure if it exists or what it says or how many names are on it.
Yeah.
That's what we're shooting for, though. We've been trying to get our hands on that.
It's interesting. So in Scientology, it's against the rules to involve the police or the authorities in any matters, whether it's a matter of someone found out that another Scientologist has abused their child,
right,
or anything. Like it's punishable by expulsion to involve the police.
Wow.
And there's ways that Scientologists explain why that's okay. Like there's technical reasons why Scientologists will explain why involving the police is harmful to the victim as well. But I think it really comes down to just to cover your ass policy from the organization. They just don't want their dirty laundry
absolutely
aired out. But it's crazy, right? Because when I was in Scientology, it was almost unthinkable to me. Like there's just dots that I didn't connect. I knew about the policy. Everyone knows about the policy of not being able to involve the police. But also, as a good little Scientologist, you truly do believe, though, that Scientologists are supposed to be as ethical as possible, are supposed to follow the law, are supposed to strive to be as ethical as possible, are supposed to put ethics in on each other. And that just because there's this rule of not involving the police doesn't mean it's okay to commit crimes, doesn't mean it's okay to commit crimes against children. And of course, Scientology would do something about it. And
so that's how they rationalize it.
Well, they rationalize that like only Scientology can fix what is wrong with people that makes them commit these types of crimes.
So there's no point in sending them to jail or anything.
No point at all.
Resolve what's in there because it's kind of like a psychology cult, right? Ultimately.
Absolutely. So, and that's the actual explanation is sending someone to jail would only prevent them from being able to apply the correct piece of Scientology that would fix them. So you're actually literally hurting them, which is just a dramatization of wanting to punish someone when actually you can fix them and all this kind of stuff. But I really think L. Ron Hubbard just realized he wanted to keep the dirty laundry out of the court system and came up with these explanations that would sound really good.
Oh, absolutely. That makes sense. Jehovah's Witnesses are not that like explicit with that rule, but that rule existed within the culture. Don't report it to the police. It existed within Jehovah's Witness culture for decades. And I don't know, like, I feel like you wouldn't get in trouble if you called the police, but it's really, they're trying to form their own internal government because they believe when the world crumbles and Armageddon comes and all that other stuff, everything is going to be broken up into like little communes. There's going to be no government and they're going to have to govern, I'm sure Scientology kind of views it the same way. Although they don't have like an end times belief, right?
Who Scientology doesn't. Do the JWs?
Oh yeah. Oh my God. They believe that the end is coming any 5 minutes now.
Well, so Scientology does push that fear that the end is coming, but realize Scientologists don't believe in a heaven or a hell or a God or a devil or anything like that. So in Scientology, the end is going to be nuclear holocaust, and it's going to be a result of the fact that Scientology did not expand fast enough. And, Hubbard's version of the Freudian subconscious is called the reactive mind.
Right.
And, Scientology auditing is supposed to erase the reactive mind. And clearing the planet is what Scientologists basically call of getting at least half the people into Scientology and up Scientology's bridge to the state of clear.
Assume
and
I know nothing about it because my audience, I'm sure there are people in my audience that know nothing. So you can't explain too much here.
So, but that's why just, the subconscious, the reactive mind, Hubbard says, every moment in your life of pain and unconsciousness is being recorded in a perfect recording that's just tucked away in your mind. Don't think about it too deeply. You've got the analytical mind, which is your conscious thinking mind, and you've got your reactive mind, which is purely stimulus response and operates purely based on these recordings of incidents of pain and unconsciousness. And all of the spoken words in one of these recordings, which L. Ron Hubbard called an engram, all of the spoken words in these engrams, when these engrams are restimulated. So he'll say, when you're tired or hungry, and if any of the perceptics in your of your environment kind of approximate the perceptics of an engram, all of the pain and unconsciousness and verbal commands of that engram will react upon you in present time underneath your level of awareness. Like you won't realize it. You'll just feel horrible. You'll have negative emotions. You'll have irrational behaviors, and that all negative emotions, behaviors, sicknesses, illnesses, pains, even like questioning yourself, insecurities, doubts, all
even
of
head
that.
colds and stuff, right? Like even physical illnesses, everything.
Yes. Blindness, lameness, everything stems from these engrams. And, in the beginning of Scientology, he wrote the book Dianetics. That was before he was even using the word Scientology. In Dianetics, his idea was that the only engrams that existed were the ones from this lifetime, because Dianetics had nothing to do with spiritual beings or previous lives. The sort of jumping off point from Dianetics to Scientology was this jumping off point of, oh, these recordings don't just go back to in the womb. They go back to previous lives. They go back trillions of years to other galaxies and solar systems. Yes, exactly. And so I was talking about clearing the planet. I was talking about why was I talking about clearing the planet?
Nuclear holocaust, how the times,
that the only reason we would wipe ourselves out with nuclear war is because Scientology had not expanded fast enough and had not cleared enough people. Clearing someone is erasing the reactive mind. Okay. And that the reactive mind is what would eventually cause everyone to wipe themselves out through nuclear holocaust.
I understand that clearing costs about $100,000 to get to. Is that right, roughly?
Sure.
Going up the bridge.
Depending on where and how, 50 to 100,000, sure. 50,000 to 100,000.
About 4 years, roughly.
You have people in Scientology for 30 years who haven't achieved the state of clear. Yeah. It's, but even then, Hubbard would tell you, well, the only thing wrong with nuclear holocaust is it'll take a long time for people to rediscover Scientology and be able to apply Scientology again. Like even in that end of times, it's like the only thing wrong with it is that it would be a problem for Scientology.
That's crazy. So do they believe that, like, is this predestined? Like the war is, or the nuclear holocaust is guaranteed to happen, or just a speculation?
No, Scientologists are trying to prevent it.
Okay. Wow. That's fascinating. Yeah. Jehovah's Witnesses came up with this bizarre Bible math. There's like this movement in the 1800s called the Millerite movement. And the Millerites in 1843, I think, believed that they had like this Bible math where they calculated out some stuff. They took some stuff from the book of Revelation and shoved it together with something from the book of Daniel and the book of Numbers, and middle, they came up with 2,520 years subtracted from blah, blah, blah. And they ended up at 1843. Well, Jehovah's Witnesses took that Bible math. I mean, it's been like years since I've, gone through this in my head, so I don't remember all the variables. They took that Bible math and changed the variables to it. Jehovah's Witnesses did in the 1870s, and came to the conclusion that the end was going to come in 1914. And, nothing happens. Like, we're all sitting here waiting. And so the founder, Charles Taze Russell, in 1914, he comes out and says, the beginning of the end is officially started, or whatever. And they claim from that point forward that Jesus came back invisibly, and he's wandering around here and picked a, Jehovah's organization in 1919 as his chosen organization. And they made like false prediction after false prediction after false prediction after that. 1922, 1975, 2000, the year 2000, and then 2001. It's just over and over again, man. Like, they've got an endless stream of failed predictions.
Yes. Well, so at least L. Ron Hubbard left it open-ended enough. He didn't make any solid predictions, so there's nothing to disprove. But how do the JWs explain to everyone why these predictions keep not coming true?
Oh, they just erase it. So it used to be they had these bound volumes. They're like the Watchtower and the Awake, the little magazines that they pass out or whatever. They would put these things into bound volumes, just like the whole year's a whole year's worth of Watchtowers in these bound volumes. And when they did these predictions that were blatant and obvious and everybody knew what was happening, they told everybody to burn all of their old literature. It's now considered apostate material, and we will give you any information that you need moving forward. You should be burning all of your literature that's older than like 5 years, basically. And they have actually gone back and retroactively changed words, like in their online library or whatever. They've changed words in their magazines and reissued them and pretended it just didn't happen. It's just ridiculous. And it's kind of sad because it seems like Jehovah's Witnesses are moving down a path right now that's bound to end in misery. They have this belief about when the end comes, their message is going to change from one of good news to judgment. And that basically means they're going to continue knocking on your doors when, Armageddon starts, or not Armageddon, but when the Great Tribulation starts, like the beginning of the end, actually. They're going to continue knocking on your door, but they're going to stop inviting you to join, and they're going to start telling you, that's it, you're screwed, for lack of a better term. So it seems like they're kind of moving down that path right now. And it's got everybody worked up into a blood frenzy at the moment. It's kind of sad to see.
Wow. How many Jehovah's Witnesses would you estimate there are in the world?
8.5 million in the world, 1.3 million in the United States. I think we can trust their numbers mostly. What about Scientologists? How many are there?
In the entire world.
Yeah.
I've done estimates. I put this into spreadsheets that every Scientologist can look at and be like, oh yeah, you're right. If they announced that L. Ron Hubbard himself was coming back and he was releasing OT 9 and 10, maybe if you're very generous, you could scrape up in the entire world 30,000 people to come and hear the announcement.
Wow, that's it. I thought it would be a little bit bigger than that.
That's a very generous estimate. It's probably closer to 20.
That's crazy. And they have such like outsized influence, compared to how big they are? It's probably because of all the celebrity endorsements and everything, right?
I swear to God. I mean, I do feel like it's mostly because of Tom Cruise, because even if you were to say, oh, it's because of all their money, I'm sorry, the Mormons and the JWs have exponentially more money than Scientology.
Right.
Like how much money would you guess the JW organization has?
Well, they had to pay out a whole bunch of money for child abuse settlements recently, and that meant they had to sell off their headquarters. I would say they sold their headquarters for about 1.3 billion. So we're looking at about that, probably somewhere in that vicinity after their
Oh, you think that's all they're worth?
Yeah, I don't think they're worth much anymore. They used to be worth more.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, the
But the
Mormon Church has
Mormons,
lost more money in their couch cushions than Scientology has.
right,
I mean, Scientology may have got a few billion in the bank,
right.
and
God,
that's
that's
not even
fascinating.
cash in the bank. That includes their real estate.
Right. That's
Um,
really interesting. Actually, I'm kind of close to the Celebrity Center, come to think of it. I wonder
are you in
what.
LA?
No, 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 no. I'm in New York City. Isn't there
Oh,
one here?
CC New York. There's probably a celebrity center still in New
I think
York.
I
I
passed
can't.
it.
I'll take your word for it. I couldn't. Some of the celebrity centers have combined with their nearest organization, and I couldn't remember if the Celebrity Center in New York had combined or not.
It's right in Times Square. So I don't think they'd put like just a normal meeting place in Times Square. I figured it'd have to be something really special.
Does it say Celebrity Center? Or does it say
I
Scientology?
haven't seen it say. It just says Scientology as far as I can, as far as I
That's not
remember.
the celebrity. That's not
No?
the Celebrity Center. But they have a big building right off Times Square.
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and I mean, if it weren't for Tom Cruise, would anyone really know about Scientology? I don't know. And John
Probably
Travolta.
not. Yeah, Kirstie Alley too. Kirstie Alley's kind of beyond her prime now, but she's another
She's
influence.
dead, dude.
Oh, is she? Is she really? Is she dead? Oh my God! How long has she been dead? This is heartbreaking news to me now. I had no idea.
Maybe
That's
6 or
crazy.
7 months ago. I forgot.
Oh, okay. So it was recent. I was gonna feel bad if it was like 10 years ago, and I'm just sitting here thinking, like, oh, that's funny.
She's definitely past her prime, though. You're right about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the outsized influence is crazy. I mean, that's one of the biggest things that will surprise people is like, how many Scientologists do you think there are? And,
Yeah.
and here's what's crazy. Even Scientologists think there are millions of Scientologists because they've never just sat down and done the math. And even if their local organization is so tiny, and they all know their local organization is tiny, the propaganda that comes out from management is such that in each one of these local organizations, there's only about 150 churches of Scientology in the world.
Right.
You always think that yours is the smallest. You always think everyone else is doing great and that you guys are the ones struggling. Or even if you always think Russia must be booming, or Mexico's like Scientology's taken over Mexico, or South America.
Because they give you that impression. They want you to believe that. Yeah. Interesting.
Yes.
That's crazy. I wonder how many major celebrities there are in there. I heard that, I don't know, years ago, I think Joe Rogan said when he was coming up in, the comedian space and the acting space and Fear Factor and everything else, Scientologists were waiting there for him to come out. Anybody that looked like they were on the rise, Scientologists are right there ready to hand them the little pamphlet, But from my understanding, Rogan just threw it away and didn't join it, but he's talked about it a couple times, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. He mentioned, I think his neighbor was a Scientologist and gave him the book Dianetics.
Oh, really?
Or something like that. I wish he would say who the neighbor was. The story would be so much more interesting.
I know. It must have been somebody really influential, right? Because he was influential.
I guess. But really, most of the Scientology celebrities these days are people who were born and raised in Scientology and happen to make it big because they come, from an entertainment family. I mean, even the entire Masterson clan. Danny Masterson was born and raised in Scientology. These
Talking
guys
about Hyde from that 70s show.
Yeah. Or his sister Alana Masterson was in The Walking Dead.
Really? Oh my God, I didn't know. Who was she in The Walking Dead? Do you remember?
Oh, I don't know any of their names.
Okay, I'll look it up later and find out.
But his brother Chris Masterson was in Malcolm in the Middle. His brother Jordan Masterson, I think, was in a show called Walking Tall, if I'm not mistaken. Like, it's a whole entertainment family.
No idea.
Giovanni Ribisi, born and raised in Scientology. Beck, born and raised. He's left now, though, although he says he was never in, which is a total lie. But, who's another, like, no big celebrities are joining Scientology. I mean, the last big one they got was Will Smith and Jada Smith. That didn't turn out very well.
So yeah, are they not in it? I mean, I've heard that they sponsored a Scientology school and then they were kind of on the outside of it and inside. I don't know.
They're definitely not in anymore. But they're two people that were like, well, we were never really in. It's like,
Right.
yes, you were. Yes, you were. It's just so toxic. I can't think of a more toxic organization. And yet, how ironic is it that like the biggest movie star in the world is the face of one of the most toxic organizations in the world?
And it makes you wonder how similar Tom Cruise's personality is to David Miscavige. Like they're constantly together, right?
I don't know that they're constantly together, but they are best friends. Miscavige was the best man at least his last two weddings. I can't remember if he was the best man at the first wedding. All three of his wives have been declared suppressive persons and either expelled from Scientology or escaped from Scientology. Scientology usually expels you after you've escaped and won't go back.
Right.
But Mimi Rogers was his first wife. She's actually the one I think that gets credit for getting him into Scientology. Of course, Nicole Kidman, and then of course Katie Holmes.
Fascinating. I'm in love with Katie Holmes.
I know. So no, I do think that over the years, in fact, it's one of the reasons we've seen this transition from Tom Cruise, a relatively endearing, decent actor, to this crazy over, hyper, overactive, weird super Scientologist persona. Is, in my opinion, Tom has just over the years become more and more and more like David Miscavige.
Right. That's fascinating.
And in that friendship, you might think that it's Miscavige who looks up to Tom Cruise. I think it's the exact opposite of that. I think it's Tom Cruise who wants to be more like Miscavige. And
that is bizarre, man.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting power imbalance going on there. Like, who is more influential? Obviously, it's Tom Cruise, right? I mean, you would think, but I don't know. That's crazy. So let me ask you something. You said you were born in it, right? How did your parents join it?
I was 4 years old.
Oh,
but
okay.
It's easy for me to say I was born. My earliest memories are of Scientology.
Right. Okay. How did they end up in it? Like, how did they find their way to the group?
Good question. So my parents were never married and they were never actually together.
Okay.
That's why I have the two last names. So Smith is my mom's name and Levin is my dad's name. Aaron Smith-Levin. So like my parents were never even lived together. So my mom raised me and my brother. And, she was born and raised in Iowa. She had us. She moved east and she met a woman similar age in her who also had a son, like literally like a couple weeks older than me and my brother. And they just became the best of friends. Her name was Cheryl Scordato. And I think at that time, Cheryl too was a single mom. So you had these two single moms with kids the exact same age. And what I don't know is I don't know how Cheryl got into Scientology. But when they met, Cheryl was already a Scientologist. She introduced my mom to Scientology. Scientology is one of those things. It's very self-helpy. Like, it's not a spiritual thing. It's really, especially at the lower levels. I mean, even at the higher levels, it's not a spiritual thing. Like, it's very self-help. It focuses on, we can give you the tools to handle the problems of life. We can make you more competent. We can, make you more likable. We can make you more honest, more dependable, more trustworthy, all this stuff. And, if someone is searching for the answer, and also, a lot of people have been raised in organized religion and they have a bad taste and they've been exposed to it for a long time. And they're like, but this hasn't fixed it. I haven't found the answers. Well, if you've been raised in organized religion and you feel like you haven't found the answers, Scientology's for you. Right. And for the low cost of $49.99, you can take this course. We'll take cash, credit, or check.
See, that's the trick. Your mom was probably being bled dry, as everybody in Scientology is, right? Like, single mom.
My mom... What poor people do in Scientology is they join staff where you work for Scientology and you get your Scientology for free.
Okay. So auditing and stuff is free.
Yes. And that's what my mom did almost right away. She joined staff. And the weird thing is, though, you don't make money on staff. You probably make less than $100 a week on average. So even if you're on staff, you still got to support yourself with some sort of second job, or you've got to, find a partner who's
so we're not
provider.
talking Sea Org. We're talking just regular staff, right?
That's right. That's right. Just regular staff in Philly. So the Philadelphia organization in downtown Philly. 1315 Race Street. That's where I was on staff for a very, very long time. As was my mom. So, but your question is, how did they get in? It was really just as simple as that. A young 20-year-old or 24-year-old single mom of 2 meets another young 20-ish single mom of 1. And I wish I knew how Cheryl got into Scientology. But Cheryl and her kids are someone I knew and grew up with until I was, in my 20s.
Right.
So they continue to be important people in our lives. That's the simple answer. I mean,
Wait,
if I asked my mom
to leave also?
No, she's still
okay.
in. Yeah. So, if I ask my mom now, why did you get in? That's the answer that I've gotten in the past. I just knew this was what I'd been seeking my whole life. These were the answers, the real answers that really made sense, not some vague, esoteric, religious parable that you're supposed to take a lesson from or whatever the heck. And I think that's probably true it's probably a similar story that you'll hear from a lot of people who chose to get into Scientology was filled some lack of knowledge they were looking for, some answers they'd been seeking.
Right. Interestingly enough, my mom actually has a very similar story. My parents were married, had 2 kids, divorced, and then my mom started talking to Jehovah's Witnesses, and then I'm telling you, the words came out of my mom's mouth here. Okay, my mom told me that she said to my dad, either you can join Jehovah's Witnesses and remarry me, or you will never see the kids again. It's not like I'm warping this from some other perspective. Like, she gave me this information. So my dad joined and they got remarried. And then they had my older brother and then me. So 4 of us total. And yeah, it's a really similar story, actually, because they continued to have a relationship with the people that brought them into the religion. And their children were friends of mine and all the way down the line. Now, interestingly enough, my whole family was in it. My dad, my brothers, my sister, my mom, my aunt, and my 2 cousins. Every one of them has left except for my mom at this point. She's the very last one.
Really?
Yeah. I don't see her leaving, though, ever. I think she's in it till the bitter end. Do you lose anybody important when you ended up getting out?
My wife lost her whole family. I lost my younger brother. My twin brother died in a car accident when I was 23. But so is your mom allowed to be in touch with you?
Scientologist at the time, right?
No, he had already left and we had been disconnected for a few years.
Okay, interesting. So you asked if my mom talks to me?
Is she allowed to be in touch with you?
Oh yeah. No. Well, I guess it's kind of complicated. And they seem to be changing the rules a little bit, like slowly, gradually. My mom cannot talk to me. In fact, if she did talk to me, it would be a disfellowshipping offense, disconnecting offense. So yeah, I haven't really talked to her in a long time. She has, interestingly enough, broken the rules for my siblings, but she doesn't really talk to me. So yeah, I don't ever expect her to make her way out. I think it's just what it is, sadly.
So, but like, if you saying that she's broken the rules and spoken to your siblings, would that get her disfellowshipped?
That specific thing wouldn't. They aren't apostates. I'm an apostate. They're just disfellowshipped. So they left and didn't look back. I left and looked back and started criticizing what I saw. Basically, that's the real difference. And I mean, they're very critical of it too, but they don't have a YouTube channel like dedicated to talking about it, so it's a little bit different. But yeah, my mom has done disfellowshippable things even recently. Like my grandfather, her dad, died of something. He had dementia. He was just up there in years. He'd been around for a long time, and she attended his funeral, which is a disfellowshipping offense. You can't attend weddings or funerals of outsiders. Worldly ceremonies like that is against the rules. Now, apparently nobody gave the memo to my mom or said a word about it, or even gave the memo to my mom's elders, but she could definitely be kicked out for that. But what's the point ultimately, right?
Right. Have you spoken to a bunch of ex-Mormons?
Yeah, I have a bunch of ex-Mormon friends.
Have you ever spoken with Shalise Ansola? She's got a great channel, Cults to
No,
Consciousness.
no. What's the name of the channel?
Cults to Consciousness.
Oh, I know it. I know of it. Yeah, I've never talked to her before though.
I think she's the only former Mormon that I like. I was on her channel, she was on my channel, and I was shocked to learn that like her Mormon family is allowed to talk to her, even though like they might not love doing it, but they're allowed to. They wouldn't get kicked out for talking to her. And I was like, really?
Yeah.
That's wild. And I
It's
just
a
wondered if you'd
weird,
heard that from
different
other Mormons.
hierarchy. Yeah. It's a weird hierarchy. It's slightly different than Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, they are. Here's the thing: the common ground that I've found with pretty much every single cult from the very beginning is they like to control people, and they like to replace your authentic personality with like the new personality. You know, it's almost like they're clones of each other.
Mhm.
And that's really what makes something a cult. A lot of cults have this disconnection policy, never talk to this person again, but it's not a necessary component of it, you know? I've noticed they use a lot of like loaded language, a lot of like terms that they all understand, like inside terms, inside jokes that they all tell each other. So that if you go, you go from like New York City, you go to LA and you talk to like a Mormon in LA, you automatically click with them, same with Scientology and everything.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. It's funny. As soon as you say becoming more like this, the one personality, um, I can't help but mention Grant Cardone, who's one of the most famous Scientologists in the world. But what I love is that all of Grant Cardone's fanboys are all trying to be and look and talk and act more and more and more like Grant Cardone. And to me, it couldn't be more obvious because I've already seen this play out before.
Right.
People in Scientology try to behave and act and talk more and more and more like David Miscavige. These days, it's not even L. Ron Hubbard. People don't know what the hell L. Ron Hubbard was like anymore. You hear him in the lectures, he sounds all squeaky. You have no idea what the guy was really like, but people do know what David Miscavige is like. And people will
Does he
write
put
like
out
him.
videos and stuff?
He does live events like 6 times a year.
I had
from
no idea.
stage.
Interesting.
Yeah, like, the Third Reich type giant, massive stages with a podium in the center, and it's just him, which is funny because he's like 5'1". And so
That's funny.
people will even do the closings in their letters, like however he, whether it's much love or ML or L, whatever he starts doing, people will start doing.
That is crazy. I remember seeing Tom Cruise receive the Medal of Honor or some other, I don't even remember what it was. I remember watching
Freedom
that
Medal
whole
of
video.
Valor.
That's it. Yeah, and I remember that podium and the giant crowd and all ornate and beautiful, and that weird turtleneck video, dude. Oh my god.
I just did a fresh reaction video to that just a few days ago. It's aged very well.
Right? It's so funny, man. That guy is really odd, honestly. Tom Cruise is just an odd dude. I mean, I came out of Jehovah's Witnesses and I feel like they successfully replaced my personality with the Jehovah's Witness cloned personality. So in my own way, I'm very weird and Jehovah's Witnessy even after leaving. But boy, Tom Cruise doesn't seem to have anything on the Jehovah's Witness personality. It's wild.
Let me ask you this. Sometimes I ask my audience, like, what is it that resonates with them about a channel that's all about Scientology? Like, I never would have dreamed that I could have like almost 220,000 subscribers. I never thought I could get 100,000. And I get some really interesting feedback about what resonates with them hearing former Scientologists talk about Scientology. What do you think? Like, have you ever asked, like you've got, I don't know, 50% more subscribers than I do. What do you think has resonated with people and brought them to your channel and caused them to stay and stick around?
Well, I think I started out talking about Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, actually, I started out talking about SJWs and I mean, it was kind of a little bit of a political thing that I was diving into just a little bit. But I ended up talking about Jehovah's Witnesses, and that just clicked with people. It was crazy. I don't know why it just blew up when I was talking about that, just like you talking about Scientology, just explodes. I think it's
But there's
because
also like 100 times more JWs in the world than there are Scientologists. Do you think your viewership in the beginning was just a lot of former JWs, or do you know?
no, definitely not. I think it's about interest in I think it's about similarities between different beliefs and different things. Ultimately, here's something that I've heard before. This is not originally me, but I really appreciate it. Ultimately, a cult is like an abusive relationship between an adherent and the leadership, right? And people listening to what I'm describing about Jehovah's Witnesses and how they controlled the things that I did and all of that stuff, saw something in what I was saying in the relationships that they had, whether it was with another extremist group or just their parents or their boyfriend or whatever, And I think that's probably why it resonated with people, because they like hearing about unusual things. Like, it's not typical to hear about Scientology, for example, right? And they like relating it back to their own lives. That's my guess, but
Abusive relationship is, for me, the most common and basic answer.
Yeah.
That, because you're like, well, how many people were really in a cult? I don't know, but not that many relatively. But how many people have been in abusive relationships? A shitload.
Yeah.
And when you hear stories of how, well, in Scientology, it would be either the ethics officer or the reg or the auditor or your senior. It really comes down to just a freaking abusive relationship.
Yeah.
You end up having an abusive relationship with the organization itself. And this sort of gaslighting, which is a word that I hate, but it's so accurate and applicable in the high control group situations. People experience that a million different ways in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever heard of Stephen Hassan before?
Steve Hassan, I've had him on my channel.
Have you really?
I've had him on my channel. I've gone on his channel. His book, Combating Cult Mind Control, there's 2 books I tell everyone to read when they're coming out of Scientology. Steve Hassan's Combating Cult Mind Control and Russell Miller's Barefaced Messiah.
I have not read that one. I got to write that down. Barefaced Messiah?
Yep.
I'll take a look at that one. Really interesting. Yeah, I've had Steve Hassan on my channel too. Interestingly enough.
I met him in Philly at one of the meetings of what is it called? ICSA, the International Cultic Studies Association. Yeah. I did a panel of a few other former Scientologists a few years ago, and Steve was there, so I got to meet him in person. And then, yeah, I think just in the last 6 months, I've done an interview or 2 with him.
Well, fascinating. Well, the reason I bring him up is because, oh God, I was going to switch my screen, but no. It's because he wrote something called the Influence Continuum. Have you heard of that?
So I've heard of it, but I don't think is it a book or just a thing?
No, it's just like a model, a chart that you can look at, just a single image.
Oh, then I've probably seen it.
It's kind of like the BITE model, similar to it, but yeah, okay. Influence Continuum is fascinating, and it kind of describes how people are using destructive influence on the members from just like a person-to-person level, and then a leader to person level, and then an organization to person level, and how destructive influence is different from constructive influence, encouraging creativity, humor, and self-exploration versus following our doctrine and encouraging fear and guilt in people, that kind of thing. Pretty interesting.
I'll tell you why Steve's book was so impactful for me. Even when I no longer believed in Scientology at all, and I thought, no such thing as the upper OT levels and L. Ron Hubbard's a con man and all this shit, I did not know until I read Steve's book how hard emotionally I was holding on to the fact that Scientology might be bullshit, but boy, is it some special bullshit.
Right.
And his story of how he got recruited into the Moonies as a very smart, college age young man, and how he was, suckered into it, for lack of a better way of putting it, and how he was controlled and how he was manipulated, and the stories that he tells and everything. I was fucking sobbing listening to this thing, stuff that was not emotionally, is not very strong emotional material. And I was like, Scientology just garden variety bullshit.
Yep.
We literally all fell. We thought, so at first we thought we were special. Okay. And then I thought I was tricked in a very, very special way. And it was devastating to come to terms with the fact that it's like, it's not even special bullshit. This story's been being told since the dawn of time.
I know.
And then you see, when I watch Nexium, the documentaries on Nexium, have you seen them?
I haven't seen the documentaries. I've read about them though.
Dude, you just replaced Nexium with Scientology practically. I mean,
Right.
the guy took so much from Scientology, and in some ways he was even more successful in doing his thing than David Miscavige has been. And you go, well, why did they get to throw that guy in jail, but David Miscavige runs free? And the answer is because Nexium didn't have tax exemption from the IRS. That's why.
Right. Fascinating.
They didn't have that religious protection in the courts, but the shit that they did. I mean, even they even stole some of the words from Scientology. I've never
had
had
no
a chance
idea
to
they were
speak.
so similar.
Oh my God, so similar. In fact, it's a really good way to take a Scientologist who does not think Scientology is a cult at all, and you have them watch Nexium, and you just go like, does that sound similar?
Right.
I mean, like, it's crazy how similar it is.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, I wrote about Nexium. I think that Rick Allen Ross released a whole bunch of papers on Nexium. Have you heard his name before?
I've heard his name. I do not believe I've read any of his stuff. I really should.
I'm not the biggest fan of his work.
Was he the
personally,
deprogrammer guy? I hate to even throw that out there. Oh,
Yeah.
he was?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
okay,
believe
okay.
so. I mean, I think we're talking about the same person, but he really blew up on the ex-cult member scene when he got Nexium manuals that were like private, and he released them publicly, I think in 2004, and wrote a book about a whole bunch of cult-related things. He's got his own model for how cults operate and stuff. And I think Hassan and Rick Allen Ross are kind of at odds with each other. I'm not super clear on their relationship. I don't think that they really talk to each other or like each other. So, but you know what? We're all
any community ends up with its drama.
Yep.
And I don't even say that in a minimizing way. I'm not saying it's just drama.
Right.
But any community ends up with that. I mean, hell, my SPTV community has it.
Right. Oh, I bet. Yeah. Ex-Jehovah's Witness community has a ton of it. And
is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been attacked by ex-Jehovah's Witnesses for various stupid little things, for putting ads on videos or for selling merchandise or whatever other thing. I mean, by and large, people are normal and cool and regular. It's not a big deal. But every now and then you get somebody in like your comments or somebody on the Twit or wherever, or X or whatever it is now. You get somebody
Twitter to me. It'll always be Twitter to me.
Okay. You get people that just go nuts over the silliest stuff. And it's like, aren't we all like in this together, ex-cult members trying to figure out like how this happened to us and prevent it from happening to others? I don't know. Sometimes things seem kind of petty.
You just realize that we're not. We're not all in this together.
Yeah.
A lot of people are just in it for themselves and can't get past their own egos. And people would probably say that they think that of me, and that's fine. But that's just an example. Like, you're always going to get down to that pettiness at some point.
Yeah.
Okay. So we went off that because you got Steve Hassan and Rick Ross. So I know that when I was a Scientologist, the whole idea of deprogramming was very much used as a fear tactic.
Really?
That this is what the psychiatrists use. They're literally kidnapping Scientologists. Because let's be honest, that is what was happening sometimes.
It was, yeah.
And Steve's even spoken about it in some of his books that, people were being kidnapped.
Yeah.
And Scientology made so much hay with that, and would mention that at their fundraising events. And this is the dangerous environment that we're up against. And this is why you have to donate money to the International Association of Scientologists, because the IAS is fighting the legal battles to safeguard the Scientology religion. So you guys can focus on going up the bridge. And so, a lot of that anti-cult or cult recovery space has always been very toxic to me. It's kind of like, to a Scientologist, the idea of psych drugs is like, ooh, that's a bad word.
Right. You're not supposed to take medicine at all, right?
I mean, you can take medicine, but psych drugs, you can't take psych drugs. I mean, not only can you not take it, like, it's considered like pure evil. But Scientologists don't believe in, like, not evil in a religious sense, but like someone who's taken too much psych drugs is not allowed to get any Scientology auditing in this lifetime.
Wow.
So if someone's taken a lot of psych drugs, a Scientologist would say you'd be better off dropping your body. You'd be better off unaliving yourself so that you can be reborn in a body that's not tarnished with the psych drugs.
That is nuts. So even if you're not taking them anymore, does that still apply, or is it?
Yeah, you're an illegal pre-clear. You cannot get auditing this lifetime. You can ask for
Wow.
special permission to do a little bit low-level auditing here, a little bit low auditing level there. And there are Scientologists who are illegal pre-clears, and they spend their whole life just working for the organization. But privately, Scientologists would definitely be whispering to themselves, why is this guy wasting this lifetime? Just pick up a new body and start over. You're wasting time.
Wow, I had no idea. I mean, when you view reincarnation that way, I suppose, you know, you can bring yourself to any conclusion. That's absolutely crazy. I had no idea.
Yeah. So how did you, have you ever chatted with Steve Hassan, done a live with him or anything?
Oh yeah, I did a live stream with him. I've talked to him through
good.
email a couple of times. Yeah.
Oh, good.
It's been pretty cool.
Good.
I talked to him on Twitter. He followed me on there, but I'm not even on there anymore. I mean, I get on there to get some material sometimes for live streams and stuff, but yeah, I don't really use it much anymore.
Yeah, I just, so I've never been one who thought, a thought has gone through my head, and you know who needs to hear this thought?
Right.
The Twitterverse needs to hear what I think about this right now.
Yeah. It's
I've
funny.
never understood people who shout into the Twitterverse. People need to hear what I think.
Right. I actually used to use it a lot, but yeah, I just kind of walked away from it. And now if I have something funny to say or whatever, I'll say it on my community posts. That's been pretty useful. Sometimes I come up with some pretty good witty remarks or some bangers out there, but yeah, I don't use it much anymore. The Twitter or the community posts, not very often.
Yeah, interesting. So real quick, I've never asked you, was there a single big waking up moment for you as a Jehovah's Witness?
There was actually. I was on the outside of the religion. I was actually a drug addict for a couple of years. I'm pretty public about, you know, how I came out of it and recovered and everything else. But I was an addict for a while, and I still believed it, still wanted to go back. But my sister and her husband at the time, they're not married anymore, but they were still in the religion, but they were kind of breaking protocol to talk to me, you know, a little bit. And her husband, now ex-husband, said to me, did you know that the founder, Charles Taze Russell, or no, I'm sorry, one of the founding members, Joseph Rutherford, in the 1930s, had this gigantic mansion built and had it deeded to like Abraham and Isaac and all of these Bible characters, Moses, and during the Great Depression. And he just lived in it to keep it warm for them, you know. He didn't want him to come into like a cold, empty house. He's just going to live in it for him. So anyway, that was like the moment I realized, oh, this is complete BS, like all of it. And that was, for me, that was a moment you were describing earlier where you realize it wasn't special BS. It was just plain BS. Up until that moment, I believed that, well, if there is a religion that's true, it's Jehovah's Witnesses. They're the ones most likely got it right. But that was the thing that made me realize, like, they're just like every other soul-sucking, big corporate conglomerate that's trying to pull in as many donators as possible, you know?
Yeah.
That was the thing for me. What about you? What was your moment that made you not just wake up to it or leave, but realize it was complete BS?
Yes, there was a single moment. Even though my path out of Scientology was pretty gradual, there actually was a single moment. Because for me, there was a difference between questioning Miscavige and questioning management and questioning the entire freaking paradigm.
Right.
And so if I talk about the OT levels, do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, but my fans may not. So just give a little bit of a primer if you can.
Okay. So we discussed earlier the concept of the reactive mind, and Scientologists believe that we're all immortal spiritual beings with a native God-like powers. And it's our reactive minds and related things to do with the reactive mind that has caused us to no longer have these God-like powers. Like God-like, think of the Matrix. So like Neo would be what Scientologists would call a god. And that, but realize I'm using the word God generally, like Scientologists don't believe in a supreme being. Okay. But they believe we can all be like Neo.
Okay.
We can all be like Neo in the Matrix, operating independent of and senior to the Matrix and able to manipulate it. So Scientologists believe that the Matrix would be like what we call the physical universe. And as a Scientologist, you can actually become senior to the physical universe and bend it to your will.
Right.
Okay. By getting rid of the reactive mind. And then, but once you get rid of the reactive mind, that's called the state of clear. That's about halfway up the bridge to total freedom.
Right. And as we said earlier, this is a thing that takes between 50 and 100 grand to reach, and between 4 years and 30 if you ever reach it, right?
Hundreds of hours of auditing.
Okay.
But you're told that the real magic occurs on the OT levels. Now, OT stands for operating thetan. We said the Scientologist word for the spirit is thetan, which ironically sounds like Satan with a lisp. But okay. So you're told you're not allowed to know what's on the OT levels. Okay. But you're told that that's where the magic occurs. That's where you become Neo. Okay. Now, in Scientology, you can do up to OT 8. Now, Scientologists believe, and Grant Cardone is OT 8.
Okay.
You know who Grant? You know?
No,
Grant
no, I'm unfamiliar.
Oh, I keep name dropping this dude. You don't know who he is? Okay,
no.
When we're done, just Google Grant Cardone. You'll be endlessly entertained.
I will.
Okay.
I'll write it down.
I just like talking shit about Grant. Okay.
Okay.
He's one of the most famous people on the internet, but you'll see what I mean.
Okay.
So Scientologists believe that before L. Ron Hubbard died, he completed OT 9 through 15, and those are in David Miscavige has those locked away in the secret vault. And Scientology orgs have to expand to a certain size, and Scientology has to reach certain levels of influence and reach these benchmarks before the secret upper OT levels are released. Now, you have to understand, there's thousands of Scientologists who have done up to OT 8. So we already know that's not very magical. Any OT 8 you ever met was nothing special.
Right. Okay? So David Miscavige, the ostensibly should be able to like morph, bend spoons with his mind and stuff, basically, right? Is kind of.
He should be, except because nobody can, everyone generally believes that it's the upper OT levels where you turn into Neo, because everyone knows that through OTA ain't doing nothing special.
Got it.
Okay. So when I say my route out of Scientology started in 2009, that's because when I started reading stuff that made me really think David Miscavige was not everything I thought he was. Senior management was not everything that I thought it was. But there's one dude who I knew would know more than anyone else whether these upper OT levels really existed. And that was a Sea Org member named Dan Kuhn, who had worked personally with L. Ron Hubbard. After Hubbard died, one of his jobs was compiling all of the works L. Ron Hubbard did leave behind into things that could be released and become useful. And I was like, if anyone knew for sure whether there were upper unreleased OT levels, that's where all the magic is supposed to happen.
Right.
It was Dan Kuhn. Well, Dan Kuhn left Scientology.
Okay.
And when I heard from Dan Kuhn, if L. Ron Hubbard left anything behind, we sure as hell couldn't find it. I was like, someone should have told me that 20 years ago. Say no more. I'm done.
Wow, that's fascinating.
That was it. That was it.
So there is speculation among active Scientologists that there's something beyond OT8, right?
Oh, not speculation. It's core belief.
Wow.
Miscavige has been talking about releasing OT 9 and 10 for 30 years.
Do you think it's something that he could feasibly release or write himself, or no?
I don't think so. Others have speculated that he could. I don't think so. Because there's nothing he could come up with that would justify to those, if he ever created something and had allowed people to start doing it, that would justify this is what we waited 35 years for.
Right. It would be nothing special.
Now, the counter argument to that would be, dude, we're talking about cult members. You can convince a certain percentage of them about literally anything.
Right.
And there's an argument to be made there. I just, from my perspective, I go, I'm sorry. There's nothing you could feed these people. Because remember, I didn't even tell you what's on the OT levels. When you hear people talking about Xenu and the body thetans, that's the OT level shit. Your average Scientologist has never heard those words before. I never heard those words until after I left Scientology.
Right? It's banned to know anything about any of that stuff.
It's banned. It's completely forbidden. Even trying to ask about it would get you expelled. And so I never even heard the word Xenu or body thetans until after I was out of Scientology.
Wow.
And it's not that the Xenu and the body thetan story it's not that in the grand scheme of Scientology, that story is just batshit crazy because, you know, in the context of Scientology, that's actually pretty normal stuff. It's the fact that that's what's on the magical OT levels. That's where the magic was supposed to, are you shitting me?
Right.
And I'm supposed to telepathically, I'm supposed to spend the next 10 years every day telepathically counseling these sick alien souls that are stuck to my body. And that's supposed to make me better and give me powers. Like, are you shitting me?
Right.
Okay.
And nobody has powers, so it's obvious it's just BS anyway.
And nobody has any powers. Okay. And so the thing is, the one thing everyone's told about the upper OT levels is that it's totally different. It's not just more of what's on the bottom OT, lower OT levels, because how could it possibly be? Right. If it was the same, how could you possibly make people wait 35, 40 years for it?
Right.
If it was just more of the same. And in fact, L. Ron Hubbard says that the OT levels through 8, those are still negative gain, meaning you're improving yourself by taking things off of yourself, removing impurities. And he says the upper OT levels is where positive gain begins. And you go, what the fuck does that mean?
Right.
What could that possibly be? Nobody knows.
Taking things on, I guess, right?
Yeah, you're adding like super components. Like nobody knows, not even L. Ron Hubbard knows because he didn't write anything up about it.
Oh, fascinating. And
so that is the light. Like some people might go, oh, but if Scientology makes people feel better, then who gives a shit whether it's true or false? Like even a placebo pill can make you feel better. And you're like, look, there's plenty of Scientologists who go, I don't care if David Miscavige is beating the shit out of everybody every day. Scientology makes me feel better and it makes me happier and it's made me live a happier life. And I go, yeah, but is that why you're a Scientologist? Or are you a Scientologist because you've been convinced that this will make you into a superhuman?
Right.
And that information is on the upper OT levels. Like if you knew for a fact that David Miscavige was literally looking into your eyes and lying to you every single day about the existence of OT 9 and 10, you would still do this shit.
Right.
Now, if the answer to that question is yes, then God bless you. Go on being a Scientologist. But if your answer to that question is no, then stop wasting your time and your money and stop disconnecting from your kids and stop sending your family to the Sea Org and save yourself some time and some heartache and just leave now because there are no upper OT levels.
That is fascinating.
That for me was the one wake up moment. And I didn't have some crisis. I didn't have some, oh no, what do I believe? I didn't struggle with that in any way, shape, or form. And I know a lot of people do. But I didn't. For me, it was like light switch on, light switch off. I'm done. And that was it. So for you, it was the house.
Yeah, it was. And it's such an odd thing, you know, by the way, I have to get off of here in a second.
Okay. Yeah.
If that's okay. But yeah, it's such an odd thing to like be the thing that pushed me over the edge because it's so insignificant. The house is named Beth Sareem, but this is one of those things that what is it called? Retconned out of their, their belief system. Like they just kind of removed the existence of this mansion, over over the course of like, I don't know, 70 years or something. They just kind of scrubbed everything clean of it and pretended it didn't happen. I had no idea. But yeah, as it turns out, the guy that did that, Joseph Rutherford, he was an absolutely terrible person in so many ways. He was drunk all the time. Jehovah's Witnesses aren't allowed to have beards. I don't know if you knew that. That's banned. Beards are banned. And that's because the founder, Charles Taze Russell, had a big bushy beard. And the guy that took over after Charles Taze Russell didn't like Charles Taze Russell, wanted everybody to forget about him. So he banned beards. What a petty, ridiculous thing to do, right? That was Joseph Rutherford, dude who built the mansion too. It's just so much crazy stuff when you start digging into this. How did we ever believe this stuff? I mean, it obviously, I know it starts out as it doesn't include the crazy stuff to start out. I mean, it's mostly normal run-of-the-mill average stuff, or they get you when you're young and then they work you up to absolutely unhinged from reality, right? That's generally how it works.
Totally. Well, hey, this has been a great chat. Let me show everyone one more time. If you're watching on Owen's channel, I'm Growing Up in Scientology. If you're watching on my channel, Owen's channel is Owen Morgan Telltale. check him out.
Definitely. And check out Growing Up in Scientology. What's the difference between SPTV and Scientology?
Well, SPTV stands for Suppressive Person Television.
Okay, so it's just like another name for...
It's just former Scientologists talking out on YouTube. Some people associate it with my channel, but really it's, there's a whole mess of former Scientologists who are doing YouTube channels now and all talking about their experience and highlighting as many stories of former members as possible.
It's a couple of things people can look up then. SPTV, Growing Up in Scientology, right?
Yep, totally. All right, guys. Well, hey, let's do this again sometime. Hang out just for a sec afterwards and let's chat real quick.
Okay.
Thanks for hanging out with us this evening. Talk to you guys soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.